You walk out to the garden on a June morning with your coffee, and the row of cabbages you've been babying for 6 weeks looks like somebody went at it with a shotgun. Lacy holes clear through every leaf. Something ate half your lettuce in the night and left a silver slime trail to prove it. And there on the tomato, a hornworm as fat as your thumb, chewing away in broad daylight like it pays rent. Most people, right about now, drive to the store and come home with a jug of something that has a skull's worth of warnings on the back, spray the whole garden down, and feel like they did something. 2 weeks later, the bugs are back, and now the ladybugs aren't. You're on the hook to buy that jug again and again, which, if you sit and think about it, is a strange kind of cure, one that needs you sick forever to keep working. Here's what the old growers knew, back before there was a jug to buy. Nearly every pest in your garden can be beaten with something that costs $1 or $2 or nothing at all, and one after another the folks in the white lab coats keep testing these old tricks and finding out they hold up as well as the expensive stuff. Sometimes better. I'll give you 5 that carry the whole load. The first one is probably sitting by your kitchen sink right now. Plain soap. So what does plain soap do to a bug that a $40 spray can't do better? To understand it, you have to know how a soft-bodied insect stays alive. An aphid, a whitefly, a spider mite, a mealybug. None of them has bones or a shell. What holds them together and holds their water in is a thin, waxy skin, a coat of grease over the whole body. As long as that waxy coat stays whole, the bug keeps its moisture and lives. Strip the coat off, and the bug dries out and dies. Quick, the way a slug dies on a pinch of salt. That's the whole trick of soap. Soap is built to cut grease. It's what it does in your sink, and it cuts the grease right off an aphid the same as off a frying pan. The fatty acids in real soap break down that waxy coat. The bug can't hold its water, and within a few minutes it's finished. It works on contact and only on contact, which makes it about the gentlest thing you can reach for. Once it dries, it's done. It doesn't hang around poisoning the ground for weeks. Gardeners have been mixing soap and water for their bugs since at least the 1800s, and when the agricultural stations finally got around to testing it, they had to tip their hats to the old soap trick. Here's how you make it. 1 good tablespoon of pure liquid soap into a quart of water, or shave a little off a bar of old-fashioned soap and melt it in warm water. Shake it up, put it in a pump sprayer, and hit the bugs directly, not the plant, the bugs. You have to wet them for it to work. Get up under the leaves where the aphids hide in their crowds, because a squirt over the top misses the whole colony living on the underside. Now the mistake, and it trips up almost everybody, because it seems like it shouldn't matter. Soap is not detergent. The blue stuff in the squeeze bottle by your sink is mostly detergent, full of degreasers and brighteners and scent, and that harsh mix will scorch your leaves brown and do a poor job on the bugs besides. You want actual soap. An old bar of Fell's naphtha, a bottle of Castile, a plain unscented liquid soap. If the label brags about cutting grease and killing germs, it's the wrong thing. The other half of the mistake is timing. Spray in the cool of the morning or the evening, never in the hot midday sun, because soapy leaves and blazing heat can burn, and a few plants, some ferns and squashes especially, are touchy about it no matter when. Try it on a couple of leaves first and wait a day if you're not sure. My neighbor growing up, a wiry old woman named Hazel who gardened a steep patch in the Blue Ridge, kept a bar of Fell's naphtha and a jar on a shelf by her rain barrel, and she'd swipe the wet bar a few times through the water and call it done. Her roses never had an aphid on them. You won't ever see a bar of soap advertised as pest control, and there's a reason, the same reason that runs through this whole video. A tablespoon of soap you already own can't be bottled and branded and sold back to you at a markup. Somebody once figured out they could pour that exact soap into a fancy bottle, call it insecticidal soap, and charge $12 a quart for what you can mix for a nickel. Same thing, nicer label. Soap knocks down the soft-bodied bugs you can see. But the worst damage in a garden is often done by something soap runs right off of, the caterpillars. And for them, the old growers had a helper you can't even see with your eyes. A living one. Caterpillars are a different kind of enemy. The cabbage worms that match your kale leaf so perfectly you'll swear there's nothing there until the leaf is gone. The hornworm that strips a tomato plant to bare green sticks overnight. Soap slides right off their tough hides. But there's something that handles them. And it isn't a poison at all. It's a germ. Back in 1901, a Japanese scientist named Shigetane Ishiwatari was trying to figure out what was killing off silkworms in the mills, and he tracked it to a certain bacterium living in the dirt. 10 years later, in 1911, a German researcher named Ernst Berliner found the same tiny thing killing flower moths in a mill in a region called Thuringia, and that's the name it carries to this day, Bacillus thuringiensis. Everybody just calls it BT. Here's the beautiful part, and it's about as close to a miracle as pest control gets. This bacterium makes a certain protein, and that protein is a key that fits exactly one lock. It only harms a caterpillar. When a cabbage worm eats a leaf dusted with butt, the protein unlocks and tears open the lining of its gut, and the worm stops eating within the hour and is dead in a day or two. But that same protein does nothing to you, nothing to your dog, a bee, a ladybug, a bird, an earthworm. Anything without that exact caterpillar lock never even notices it's there. It's a poison that knows the difference between the worm eating your cabbage and the child eating supper beside it. You buy it as a powder or a liquid, sold under names like Dipel or Thuricide, but ask for BT and any garden store knows it. Mix it with water and spray it on the leaves the caterpillars are eating. They have to swallow it, so you coat the leaves they're working, tops and undersides both. Now the mistakes, and there are two that matter. The first is sunlight. BT is a living thing, and strong ultraviolet sun breaks it down in a day or so, which is why you spray in the evening and let it go to work overnight while the caterpillars feed. The second mistake pricks my conscience a little, so listen close. But kills every caterpillar that eats it, and that includes the caterpillar that was going to be a swallowtail or a monarch. So you do not blanket the whole yard. You spray the cabbage and the broccoli and the tomato, the plant's actually under attack, and you leave the milkweed and the wildflowers the good butterflies use strictly alone. Aim it. Don't broadcast it. Here's the line to carry with you. The best pest control was never about finding a stronger poison. It was about finding a smarter one, something that hits the single bug you're after and lets the 1,000 innocent ones go on about their business. Nature was already making those down in the dirt, long before any factory tried. Which brings up a bigger idea. The one that separates the folks who garden in peace from the folks who fight a losing war all summer. Because there's an army of killers already working your garden for free, and the most common mistake in all of gardening is slaughtering them by accident. A famous woman proved it back in 1962, and it changed the world. In 1962, a marine biologist named Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring, and it landed like a thunderclap. She had gathered up the hard evidence on what the new chemical sprays were really doing out in the world, and one of the plainest truths in it was this: when you spray a broad poison to kill your pests, you also kill the predators that were eating those pests for free. And the predators are always slower to come back than the pests. So a few weeks after you spray, the pests come roaring back with nothing left to eat them, worse than before. You didn't solve anything. You knocked out your own side and handed the field to the enemy. Think about what's actually living in a healthy garden. One ladybug eats 50 aphids in a day and thousands in her life. The lacewing lays eggs that hatch into larvae, so hungry for aphids that gardeners nicknamed them aphid lions. Tiny wasps, far too small to sting you, that lay their eggs inside a living hornworm and hollow it out from within. A whole company of hunters is out there working your rows around the clock for no wages, and you never see most of them do it. The one time you notice the system at all is the moment you break it. This is the costliest mistake in the whole garden, and nearly everybody makes it. You see a few aphids, you panic, you hit the plant with a broad spray, and you feel like you handled it. What you actually did was kill the ladybugs and the lacewings and the little wasps right along with the aphids, and now, when the aphids bounce back in 10 days, as they always do, there's nobody left to stop them. You've signed up for a war you have to fight forever, and every bottle you buy digs the hole deeper. They even had a triumph to point to. Back in 1888, an entomologist named Charles Valentine Riley saved the entire California orange crop, which was dying by the acre from a scale insect, by shipping in a little Australian ladybird beetle that ate that scale and nothing else. No poison. One bug set against another. The orchards came back in a single season. So instead of killing your army, you feed it and house it. Predators need nectar and pollen in the stretches between kills, and they need it all season, so you tuck flowers in among your vegetables. Sweet alyssum along the edges, low and white, blooming till frost. Dill and fennel let to flower, a patch of yarrow, a few cosmos. Those blooms are a mess hall for the good bugs, and a garden with the mess hall running keeps its own hunters fed and on patrol. Here's the quiet truth under all of it, and it took me years to make my peace with it. A garden with 0 bugs is not the goal, and it isn't even healthy. A few pests are the food that keeps your predators around. You are not trying to empty the garden of life. You're trying to hold it in balance, tilted just a little your way, and a bare, sprayed-out plot has no balance left to tilt. It only swings from one disaster to the next. The soap and the butt and the good bugs handle a great deal between them. But sometimes, a problem gets ahead of you, and you want something in a jar you can mix tonight and spray on the trouble. The old growers had a recipe for that too, and every last thing in it came off the kitchen shelf. This is the jar I keep mixed on the potting bench through the summer, the one I reach for when something's gotten out ahead of me, and every piece of it earns its spot. Start with garlic, 4 or 5 cloves, crushed. Garlic is loaded with sulfur compounds, allicin chief among them, the same stuff that gives it the bite, and most insects can't abide it. It confuses the ones that hunt by smell, and it's mildly deadly to the soft-bodied ones outright. Crush it and let it steep overnight in a little warm water. Add a couple of hot peppers, chopped, or a good spoon of cayenne. Wear gloves and keep your hands away from your eyes. The heat in a pepper is a compound called capsaicin, and it burns an insect the way it burns your mouth, an irritant they crawl away from. It works on the 4-legged raiders too, the rabbit and the squirrel that get a noseful and decide your lettuce isn't worth the trouble. Then a small handful of strong-smelling leaves if you have them. Mint or rosemary, bruised. The oils in them, the menthol and mint especially, throw up a wall of scent that jams a bug's ability to find your plants at all. A pest mostly noses its way to dinner, and a cloud of mint is like turning off the porch light. Now a spoon of that pure soap from before, and it does 2 jobs at once. It strips the waxy coat off any soft bug the spray lands on, and it makes the whole mix cling to a waxy leaf instead of beating off and running to the ground. Soap is the glue that holds the recipe on the plant. And, if you have it, a spoon of neem oil, pressed from the seed of an old tree, which carries a compound that keeps a bug from feeding and from molting into its next stage. Neem doesn't drop them where they sit. It quietly shuts down their eating and their breeding, and the infestation fades over a week or so. You steep it all overnight, strain it through an old rag so it won't clog your sprayer, cut it with about a quart of water, and spray it under the leaves at dusk. Now let me stop you before you go dousing the whole garden with it, because here is the thing almost nobody in these videos will tell you, and it matters more than any recipe. Natural does not mean harmless. That word gets thrown around like a free pass, and it's a lie that gets a lot of good bugs killed. Soap kills a ladybug just as dead as an aphid if it lands on her wet. Neem is hard on bees. Even the pepper and the garlic will run off a friend as fast as a foe. A spray does not know whose side anybody is on. It only knows what it touches. So you follow 3 hard rules, and I mean follow them. You spray only the plant that's actually infested, never the whole garden. You spray at dusk, after the bees have gone home, so the mix is dry before they're back at work in the morning. And you never spray an open flower, because a flower is exactly where the pollinators live. Break those rules, and your homemade spray does the same dumb harm as the jug from the store, only with a nicer smell. There's the mistake, and it's the same one people make with every spray. Store-bought or homemade, too much and too broad. A pest spray is a scalpel, not a fire hose. You touch the one trouble spot and you leave the rest of that living, working garden alone. Every bit of that came out of a kitchen. But the oldest pest fighter of them all came from neither a kitchen nor a lab. It came out of the ground, yellow and stinking, and people were dusting it on their crops before they even knew how to write down that they'd done it. Long before anybody knew what a germ was, before Rome, before the pyramids were old, farmers were fighting their bugs and their blights with one yellow powder dug straight out of the earth, sulfur. The Sumerians, 4,500 years ago, were dusting sulfur on their crops to keep the insects down. When Homer wrote the Odyssey, near 3,000 years back, he had his hero call for burning sulfur to cleanse a hall of its rot and its vermin. Every old farming people on earth, it seems, stumbled onto the same yellow rock and found it drove back the things that ruined a crop. It is very likely the oldest pesticide there is. And here's the part that ought to stop you. It still works, and the modern organic growers, the ones with all the science behind them, still reach for it. Sulfur is one of the few pest and disease fighters that made the whole long trip out of the ancient world and onto the approved list of today. Dust it fine, or spray it as what the old-timers called lime sulfur, and it stops powdery mildew, that white felt that creeps over your squash leaves in a wet August and chokes them dead. It stops rusts and scab. It knocks back spider mites, a yellow powder your great-grandparents' already trusted, sitting right there beside the newest chemistry on the shelf, doing a job neither one has ever bettered. But sulfur has a temper. And here's the mistake that scorches gardens every summer. You cannot use it in the heat. Put sulfur on a plant when the day's going to break 90 degrees, and it turns on the very leaves you are trying to save and burns them. So you dust or spray it in the cool, on a mild day, in spring or fall, or the soft edges of summer. And there's a second trap. Never put sulfur on a plant within 2 or 3 weeks of an oil spray, because sulfur and oil together turn to poison on the leaf, and the two of them will do more harm than any bug would have. Keep them far apart on the calendar. Past that one caution. It is about the safest and plainest defense a garden ever had. A rock, ground to powder, older than the plow that's older than the country. Some knowledge is so old and so good, it just quietly keeps working, handed down so long that nobody remembers who first thought to try it. Only that it never once stopped earning its keep. Put all 5 of these together, and you can walk your rows in peace. Before I let you go, though, let me give you the thing that ties all 5 together and makes any of them work. Because a remedy aimed at the wrong bug is just wasted effort. You have to read the damage. The garden leaves you a note every time, and once you learn to read it, you'll know which of these 5 to reach for before you've even found the culprit. Neat holes chewed clean through the leaves, or ragged edges that got worse overnight, almost always means a caterpillar or a chewing beetle. Turn the leaf over and look, because that's where they hide in the daylight, and where the eggs sit in little clusters. That's your BT, or your fingers. A leaf eaten down to lace, with just the veins left and the surface scraped away, points to beetles working in the open, and those you knock into a can of soapy water or keep out with a cover in the first place. Silver slime trails and whole seedlings gone by morning is the signature of slugs, and for them, you go out after dark with a flashlight, or lay a board down for them to gather under and flip it at dawn. Leaves that curl and turn sticky, with a sooty look and a line of ants marching up the stem, means aphids, and the ants are farming them for the sweet honeydew, protecting them from your ladybugs. Hit the aphids with soap or a hard blast of the hose and deal with the ants, or the aphids just come right back under guard. And a white, powdery film creeping over the leaves is no bug at all. That's a fungus, and that's where the sulfur earns its keep, along with better spacing so the air can move. The plainest rule of all runs under every one of these. Look under the leaves, and look often. The eggs are always on the underside, hidden from the sun and the rain and from you. And a leaf you turn over today saves you 100 hungry mouths next week. Catching the eggs is the cheapest pest control there ever was. So there's the 5. And look how little of it ever needed a store. A spray of plain soap for the soft bugs you can see. A dusting of butt. the living germ that takes the caterpillars and spares everything else. A garden planted to feed and shelter the hunters already working for you, instead of a poison that kills them by mistake. A jar of kitchen garlic and pepper aimed like a scalpel at the one plant in trouble. And a little yellow sulfur, older than nearly anything, for the mildews and the mites. Not one skull and crossbones bottle in the bunch. And underneath all five, the oldest trick there is, the one that cost nothing at all. You walk your rows. Every morning if you can, coffee in hand, turning a few leaves over, catching the hornworm while it's small, and the egg clusters before they hatch. An old market grower named Odell I knew in the Shenandoah did it at first light every day of the season with an empty coffee can, and dropped in what he found, and his beds were the cleanest in the valley. Half of pest control is just paying attention, and nobody has ever found a way to sell you that. The next time you find your garden chewed and your first thought is to drive to the store, stop on the porch a minute. Nearly everything you need is already in the house, or out in the yard, or in the good bugs working the bed right in front of you. The people who grew our food for 10,000 years did it without a single jug, and the garden was better for it, and so were the bees. If you know a gardener worn out from spraying and losing, send them this. Tell them to set the jug down and pick up a bar of soap. A garden was never meant to be a battlefield. Tend the balance, and it mostly keeps itself.